when you're looking for a lawyer, look for a lawyer who regularly helps clients like you, is maybe a good way to say it. Or are you their only type of client, or do they do that? And ask them that. Hey, how much of your career, how much of your practice do you dedicate to clients like me?
Welcome to the Verdict Signal podcast, where we feature how top attorneys help people make informed choices, avoid common mistakes, and move forward with confidence. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Verdict Signal, and today we're expanding our conversations to the experts who protect what people build, their careers, families, and businesses. I have Andrew Legrand, a Louisiana business attorney who's been helping companies scale securely since 2011, focused on preventing legal problems before they become expensive headaches. He works with business owners on the core areas that create the biggest risk: employment and HR, contracts and partnerships, including everything from handbooks and compliance to clear agreements for profit sharing, dispute resolution, and exit strategies. Andrew is known for a proactive approach, running regular legal audits to spot issues early and strengthen a company's foundation. He earned his JD from Loyola University in New Orleans. He still volunteers with Loyola Law School's business clinic and regularly educates business owners on avoiding legal pitfalls so they can operate confidently and grow. So Andrew, welcome and glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Appreciate the introduction. I think you hit all of it.
Okay, I guess we're done then. We don't need to do the interview more. So Andrew, let's start off from the very beginning. Tell me, how did you first get interested in the legal field?
But probably just through family. I guess a couple of things. My dad's a lawyer. My godfather is a lawyer, so I always was kind of interested. Had a lot of uncles, a few other uncles who were lawyers. So I feel like there were just lawyers in my gambit early on. And when I started law school in 2008, law school was still kind of a go to law school, get a really good paying job when you come out. I started law school before the 2008 financial crash, and that kind of changed things a little bit. And now the cost of law school, and asterisk for anybody considering it, might not be the logic, might not be the quite as it was in the 80s, the 90s, the early aughts, where it was like that. So I think having a good, stable career, having people in my orbit who were lawyers. Those were always things that really attracted me to it.
Okay. And what led you to focus specifically on the business side of law?
So you mentioned I went to law school in New Orleans. I'm from here. I started law school in 2008. 2005, Katrina happened. And I wanted to, I didn't choose business law necessarily before going to law school, but in law school, it was, hey, what areas of law do you want to practice? You start to realize that you can't do everything. So you got to start to focus. And business law felt like a way that I could help people. I can help people rebuild. I can help entrepreneurs create jobs and opportunities, and spread that wealth. One entrepreneur who creates a business that provides 500 jobs, provides for 500 families, and the businesses that those families support. So it felt, and it still does feel like an area of law that feels like I'm building something up. I'm not tearing something down. I don't feel like I'm ever doing questionably ethical things. And it's just a fun area of law to really feel like you mentioned, I think one of the first things you said was helping people build, and that's just a good feeling.
Now, Andrew, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about working with an attorney?
That they should do it way before they think they need to. I'll touch on that a little bit more. Generally, in the world of business, and you kind of hinted at it too with our proactive approach, is there are things I can do for you early on, in either the business or a problem or something along those lines, where 5 minutes of advice can save you thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in liability, right? And a lot of people don't go, for whatever reason, don't go to a lawyer until there's the pants are on fire. When they realize that they maybe sat close to the fire, they're touching it, they're feeling it, it's hot, but it's not super hot enough to where they got to call the lawyer. So they wait a long time, and you get into a situation you're like, sometimes I have to tell people I can't fix this. Whereas if we had been working together before this problem started, I could have given you 15 minutes worth of advice to do this instead of that. And this would have been a much smaller issue for you.
Okay. And I want to start diving into some of those individual items, talking about that proactive approach to it, like the partnerships. And when it comes to business, this is probably the one that I think your average person would probably guess would be kind of a big issue would be partnerships. So what are some things people need to be aware of when it comes to partnerships and how that 15-minute call that you mentioned could save them a lot of trouble down the road, potentially?
Um, yeah. So partnerships are by far the most complicated thing I do, right? And it's not even close. And it's complicated because people underestimate all the time how complicated they are, right? And so one of the best examples I have in this situation is people say, well, I'm going into business with so and so, and we trust each other, so we don't need to spend a lot of money on the lawyer documents. And I like to point out to people that I, as a lawyer with 15 years experience, have yet to meet somebody who's bringing on a business partner they don't already trust. Right? Every business partnership divorce we've done, every partnership we've formed, um, trust exists already. So people use something that's a prerequisite to the business relationship as a reason to not do things correctly. And that to me is kind of one of the biggest red flags. Well, we trust each other. And I like to point out that a lot of business partnerships fail for reasons that have nothing to do with trust, right? Your partner could be at a red light and they could get rear-ended by somebody and die in a wreck. Has nothing to do with trust, but now all of a sudden you've got a succession problem because your business partner is no longer that person. It's their spouse who they were separated from, who you now have to negotiate with. It's their kids who don't like you. It's whatever, insert this, that, or the other, right? So business partnerships are an area where people tend to think they're easy. It's a form. It's this, that, or the other, and they miss the nuance of relationships. It's also one of the few areas where I can guarantee that the partnership is going to end.
Mm.
There's no question. They all end.
Mhm.
It's guaranteed. It's one of the few areas of law where I can say this is without a doubt going to happen at some point in time,
Mhm.
right? You guys might sell and you might all be happy. Everyone buys their own vacation home.
Mhm.
It might end because you disagree and you want to walk away. It might end because we're mortal and we're going to do what mortals do,
Mhm.
right? And so it's guaranteed to end. And a lot of people just don't come into it thinking about how they're going to get out, how they want to get out, and what it looks like. And then you get into the whole, people are like, oh, he's 50-50. We're talking about money. And they kind of miss um, the nuances of, are they going to work from home? Or are they going to work from an office? Are they going to wear a suit and tie every day? Or are they going to be casual? The kind of things that people actually wind up fighting about really tend to be pretty small things that get into much bigger issues.
Okay. So partnerships, I mean, business partnerships, there's this saying that it's kind of like getting married. So would like a partnership agreement kind of be similar to like almost like a prenup on the marriage side? Is it kind of like a similar concept, or is it structurally and kind of conceptually different?
Um, Maybe it's close, right? I'll say this is prenups and partnership agreements is they both have this benefit that the one of the biggest benefits that people underestimate in either one of those agreements is that it's not the document itself. The conversations that the partners, either romantic or business, have to try to complete that document are just as valuable as the completed document itself, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to do a prenup, it's going to, hey, here's a list of questions to go through. Let's talk about this. And say, oh, I didn't know you were interested in that. I didn't know this, right? And you're going to learn something new. So it's people tend to underestimate that the process of creating those sorts of documents is probably just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the actual signed physical paper at the end, right? So many people just go online and download a partnership agreement and they don't read it and they sign it and they say, well, yeah, we've got one, and they skip that whole process of communication and discovery that adds just as much value to it, right? So the other thing, to compare it to marriage, the other way I like to think about it, is that marriage is something that tends to have better and more sympathetic rules around, right? There's a clear divorce process. Every state has really clear rules about divorce and has kind of an interest in separating those two people. Whereas businesses are kind of like, you guys kind of opted into that because it's not romantic. There's not as much clear guidelines and rules on how to separate people in a business context. So I'd say the rules of separation in a marriage are more developed and more mature and easier. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's easier to get divorced in a marriage than it is in a business partnership at times. Um, and whether you sign a partnership agreement or not, the partnership agreement exists, right? Every state has a default partnership agreement that's written into the state law.
Mhm.
And so what you're doing by signing it is agreeing to the parts you want to agree to and modifying the parts you don't.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So get an attorney to help with your partnership agreements.
Yes, and here's kind of the funny part that most people don't realize is we've done a lot of things where people don't realize how expensive and time consuming it is to do a partnership document, and we've probably talked to just as many people out of partnerships as we've done because they don't realize how complex they are. And, it's an odd situation, but it's always a win to me
Mhm.
when I can explain to somebody, look, you want a partnership document and you think you're coming to a Burger King where you just like, I want a burger and I'm going to just grill something up and give it to you. And it's just a piece of paper that you want to sign. But meanwhile, I'm going to talk to you about the million different things you need to think about and really try to help you think about whether or not this is something you truly want to do, right? So I tell people it's more like hire a lawyer who will coach you through the process of creating a partnership. That's where a lawyer can add a lot of value. And again, that might cost several $1,000s. Our litigation services, we say it's a minimum fee of $7,500,
Mm.
right? So when we're talking about cost, the cost to separate people, when we look at the cost of our average partner business divorce, it's almost all significantly higher than the average cost of creating the partnerships.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So then that's the partnership side of it. I want to jump over to the HR and the employee side because I think that's something that I think just from at first glance, most people would be like, well, HR and employees, like, why would you get a lawyer involved in it? But when you kind of really think through, like, you need the documents, you need the agreements, and all that in line. So I guess when it comes down to HR or employees, what are some of the most important things people need to understand, or really can a business lawyer like yourself help out with in this arena of business?
So we're general counsel, right? And when I say that, I mean we handle a wide variety of areas. We might not go super deep. And I want to say that to preface it with, if you have a sexual discrimination claim that's going to trial, we're probably not the employment lawyer for you,
Mhm.
right? But every business owner that has people working for them should consult with either an HR person or a lawyer or a business lawyer and understand that. So to get to the point of the 15 minutes worth of advice can save you thousands and thousands of dollars, a common issue is misclassification. People say, well, I pay all my employees as 1099s. And I tell people 1099 and employee are two mutually exclusive terms.
Mhm.
1099 employee is not something that exists. So that to me, whenever somebody says I have employees that are 1099s, I'm already sending off red flags saying, well, that's not, those don't work. That's not a thing, right? Somebody's either a W 2 employee or a 1099 independent contractor. And those two bodies of law that apply those relationships are typically two entirely different bodies of law. And people get in trouble when they start they start mixing and matching from those two different things, right? So classification is a big area. I think understanding how to terminate somebody. We're dealing with a situation right now where this employee who's in Louisiana worked for a company out of state, and they needed to terminate her, which they were completely entitled to do. Well, they offered her this severance agreement that was poorly drafted, and they said, "We'll pay you $10,000 for 3 months." Um, and they didn't pay her the last one, and she was pissed, right? Because they promised to pay her, and they didn't. They backed away. So we started looking at it. Well, it turns out they didn't pay out her PTO upon termination, which they're required to do. It
Mhm.
was $4,000 worth of PTO,
Mhm.
right? They had already paid her 20 on the severance agreement. They skipped paying the last 10.
Mhm.
Legally they only had to have her pay her. They could have just terminated her and given her the $4,000 in PTO and be done with it. Last week we sent a demand for $91,000. That's the minimum they're going to wind up paying to solve that. And it is because they didn't get an attorney involved early on to say, hey, we need to terminate somebody. Or, hey, we terminated somebody and we just got a letter from a lawyer. It was a business owner who was maybe using too much AI or trying to do it themselves or just in a situation where they didn't take the time to understand what the actual legal issues were before them
Mhm.
and what the repercussions were.
Mm, okay.
Um, we've had other situations where a good example is we'll analyze, do you have workers' comp insurance, right? If you have employees, but somehow you don't have workers' comp insurance and somebody gets hurt, you don't have insurance. You were completely exposed to their medical expenses, right? And that's a good example of where my advice is, Daniel, get workers' comp.
Mhm.
That's 15 seconds worth of advice,
Yeah.
right? Somebody gets hurt, you make a claim, you got coverage,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
You don't get workers' comp and somebody makes a claim, and now all of a sudden you're paying their medical bills out of pocket.
Mhm.
And so those are all examples. Employment is definitely an area of law where, uh, what is it? A pound of salt is worth a pound of cure, or something like that. An ounce
Mhm.
of salt is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
It's where addressing the issue early on and being aware of it can prevent very expensive mistakes later on.
Okay. And then I want to talk about exit strategies because I think when it comes to that, that's something that seems like, oh, exit strategy, like we're going to sell it, we're going to be happy, we're going to ride off into the sunset with our yacht. But what do people need to think about when it comes to exit strategies and why they need to get a business lawyer involved in that?
With the exit strategy, we think of it as it's more of a process than it is a document.
Mhm.
Right. So for a lot of our clients, exit is something that's constantly being evaluated, tweaked, adjusted. Right. Key employees might come, they might go. If you have key employees, you might need to put in benefits and other handcuffs, other things that you bring to that employee to keep them around. So when you want to exit, they're still there. We have situations where um, if there's multiple business owners, if it's a partnership, how do we make sure that if one business owner passes away unexpectedly, is there an exit strategy where the remaining partner can buy them out and the deceased partner's family gets the cash? How do we build those things in place? So I think exit strategy kind of depends on what you want to do, right? Is this a business you want to sell in a short period of time? Is this something you want to hold on to and run for a while? It's very custom in terms of looking at who you are, what you want to do, and then we also, I also try to tell business owners that nobody buys a business, right? They buy something within the business that has value. That could be, the obvious things are special pieces of equipment, our inventory. It could be the fact that you've got a location with really good Google reviews. It could be your social media. A good example is we had somebody recently who was they approached us as the buyer of a vintage clothing store, right? And we started looking at it, and the seller wanted like call it $200,000,
Mhm.
and there was like 10 grand in inventory. There was no social media, no there wasn't a long-term lease.
Mhm.
Um, there was no processes, nothing was documented, no procedures on where to find clothing, how to sell it.
Mhm.
And so we started looking at like, what are you actually buying? Or like you're buying $10,000 worth of inventory for $200,000. That
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. That just isn't it, right? So think about for that seller, for the person trying to sell, think about what it. Don't say I'm just going to sell my business.
Mhm.
Think about what it is someone is going to want to actually buy from you, and usually you can pinpoint that. Could be key contracts with big companies that are hard to acquire.
Mhm.
If you're a bar, it could be a liquor license in a location where there's no more liquor licenses being given out,
Mhm.
right? So that what changes a lot, but it's in every buy and sell transaction we've done, it's been very, very tangible. You've been able to wrap your hand around that very clearly to say, we help somebody buy a violin shop, right? They had rentals and recurring revenue. They had a really favorable lease that they could easily renew. They had social media and they had Google reviews. And this is all the things. This is the bullet point list that we're buying. So I think that's key is no one buys or sells a business. They buy or sell those things, those assets within the business that are able to clearly be identified.
Got it. Okay. Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the mistakes people make, particularly before they call a lawyer. You kind of talked about that as like they don't. But then we talked a little about AI, like people are just using AI to draft their documents or just get advice. I'm sure you've had clients also come to you and be like, hey, I had AI draft this. Can you just take a look over and make sure everything's okay? But what are some of the issues that could happen to people if they just rely on AI to create their documents for them?
It's just wrong. Yeah, I'm a proponent of AI. I use it a lot. Um, I can tell you that when I'm using AI, I need to correct about 60% of what comes out of it.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a lot. So I find AI to be very helpful when I have an outline for something I want to write in my head, and I can record it in a Zoom meeting like this, and say, AI, here's the transcript. Put this into a letter format, and now I have that thought in my head. I have a first draft that's usually really good, ready to go. But when I've used it for legal research, and this is, when I've used it for legal research, we have prompts that we've developed. We've spent time on the underlying AI technology to get better results. I still struggle to get results. It'll cite a case, Gal versus Legrand, and be like, yeah, the case you need to cite is this. And I'll look it up, and it doesn't exist. Um, you know, and so I think it's AI can be good where it's helping you reword things, but you already know how to, and you just want to say something more eloquently. It can be good with ideation. And maybe if it's a low value legal contract, okay, great. Maybe that's straightforward enough.
mm,
Um, I think the other piece that people miss about lawyers is, and maybe where they're using AI is a lot of times people come to me with a solution already in mind,
mm,
right? They say, Andrew, I want to get this from you. And it'll be a contract, it'll be insert a legal thing they want to buy. And we like to say over here, we build solutions to problems. We don't just build the solution. So I'll say, Daniel, tell me about the actual problem that you're having. Like, what is it? What is the problem? What are you trying to do? Forget the legalities, forget the document that you want me to draft, forget any of that stuff. What is it that you're concerned about? And a significant percentage of the time, that thing that they wanted is not the thing that solves their problem,
mm,
right? So a good business lawyer is somebody that's going to listen to the problem and help you figure out what the correct solution for that problem is.
mm,
Right. Here's kind of another funny example is just this morning I had a call with a former client, and she says, Andrew, I want to get a protector. She has a bar, and there's a neighbor who's reporting them for a lot of infractions that isn't true. Um, she says, Andrew, I want a protective order. What does that look like?
mm,
And I started asking why, and I get into it. Well, for me to go to court and do all this, you're probably looking at a fee of about $7,500,
mm,
and at least. And she says, "Oh, that's a lot." I was like, well, yeah. And so we started talking about, well, how else could you use that $7,500 in your business to address this problem?
mm,
And we came up with a few different ideas that were more fun and less stressful and probably had a higher chance of success
mm,
than litigation, right? So I could have just said, yeah, sure, sign here and I'll go get it. But I didn't take the time to listen to that client. But because I took the time to listen to that client and figure out like what is it you're actually trying to do? And she was grateful because she walked away with a whole different strategy than when she approached me with.
mm. Okay. And that's what a good lawyer is able to get them is that walk them through and diagnose what their true issue is and give them the solution for it.
Yeah, and that's true, and not that's true in any area of law, right? In business, I think it's particular. I think people tend to think you kind of hinted at this. People tend to think that if they do some legwork,
Mm,
the legal fees will be cheaper.
mm,
I tend to tell people that's going to make it more expensive because they're going to analyze your legwork before I figure out what the hell's going on.
yeah.
So it's a good lawyer is going to say, what's the problem? And where do you want to go? And how can we solve that problem without any preconceived notion of what that option might be? Or that all there are other alternatives that are cheaper, easier, less stressful.
Mm. And when it comes to contracts, agreements, you kind of talked about this before, but let's say someone is in a bad contract or in a bad agreement. How can they get out of it? Like, how do you help them get out of it?
Depends what the contract says.
Mm,
What's the language of the contract?
mm,
Um, Sometimes we can't, right? This gets back to the idea of that paying an attorney to review the contract on the front end might be worth a lot of money. Um, Sometimes that is the answer is, I'm sorry, you're screwed. You can't get out of this. You get out of this by declaring bankruptcy. We've had those weird, awkward conversations where somebody's kind of just stuck
mm,
because they signed something. You have to do a lot of analysis on, again, the financial um, situation of the parties, right? In other words, how much is it going to cost you to get out of the contract? You might say, well, it's going to cost me $5,000 to get out of the contract. I don't want to pay them $5,000. Andrew, what can you do for me? Oh, well, Daniel, I can help you get out of the contract. It's going to cost you $15,000. Well, okay, the $5,000 now doesn't seem so bad, does it? Right. So I think it's a lot of review on the front end, understanding what you're signing, why you're signing things, and then again applying all the factors around that contract to figure out why do you need to get out of this, what do you want to get out of this, what's your end result. And it varies, for instance, for all the bad situations we had a situation where somebody bought a person in a new medical practice bought a piece of equipment, and they paid a deposit of, like, call it 10 grand, and the equipment hadn't been delivered after a while, and based on the language of the contract, if they wanted to cancel, they were just out of the $10,000. And so I helped them write a nice, polite letter that they sent, right? I said, why don't you send this? Because if they see that the lawyer's involved, they're going to get a lawyer involved, and then lawyer, 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 and nothing's going to get done. But you, as the customer, if you write a letter to your vendor and you're nice and you're polite and you explain what you want, they might give it to you. And so we did that. We wrote the letter, and the vendor said, you know what? You're right. Here's your $10,000 back. We're sorry you had that experience with us. Like, done, right? I mean, that was like an hour's worth of work, help them get all that money back. Instead of, I think they originally approached me with, like, we need a demand letter. And I'm like, no, well, let's figure out what we're trying to do here. And we can always escalate. We can always come back to that. Right. But yeah, I think the thing with contracts is people appreciate, people tend to ignore the fact that a contract can be a two-page document. It can be a 500-page document. It can be 500 pages that is really, if you buy a house, you're signing probably at least a half dozen different contracts within that one transaction. So it really takes a lawyer to kind of look at the whole situation and figure out what's going on, what's the financial consequences, what are the options, all those different things.
okay. And when someone is trying to choose a lawyer, let's say they don't know anybody, they're trying to choose a lawyer, what advice would you give so that someone can find the right fit, or the right fit lawyer for them, one that has the knowledge, experience, and can help them get the end result they're looking for?
So for any lawyer, not just business, I would recommend trying to identify what that lawyer might do, um, what they might do besides your type of work, right? Actually, we tell people to look at the lawyer's marketing all the time,
Mhm.
right? If the lawyer is marketing themselves as a bankruptcy lawyer, don't go hire them for your divorce,
Mhm.
right? I'm marketing myself as a business lawyer. Don't hire me for your personal injury case,
Mhm.
right? So hire a lawyer who try to figure out what else they're doing. Sometimes a website can help with that. Um, that's some easy low hanging fruit right there, right? If they do this, you want a lawyer who does this work regularly. I see from time to time, like, I asked a lawyer who is a family friend about this, and this is what they said. And that advice is wrong a lot of times because that's not what that lawyer does, right? So I think something that's worth pointing out is that lawyers all go to law school and then we kind of make our own career paths, right? Which, if you contrast that with medicine, right? Think about walking through a hospital and all the people in the hospital and all the different career and education paths those people have been down, right? It looks like you work with some medical practices. Think about all the different letters people have behind their names, right? And it's not just, even in just the field of just go to doctors,
Mhm.
right? How many doctors are, okay, well, I'm a gastroenterologist, I'm a pulmonologist, I'm a this, that, I'm a podiatrist, right? They all like, I only do feet, I only do hands. It's kind of rare to meet a doctor. I mean, you can meet an internal doctor, right, who's going to refer you to a specialist, but think about a lawyer from the medical perspective. And if you think about what the medical world has done with all the different types of licenses, right? There's multiple different types of nurses, there's ICU nurses, there's registered nurses, there's nurse practitioners, right? The legal world doesn't have that level of certification. We're all just lawyers. So it's very easy for a lawyer who does personal injury to say, yes, I do business and then not do it well. So we've seen a lot of we're actually in at least one transaction right now where there's a lawyer on the other side who's making it more difficult because he doesn't do this work regularly.
Mm.
And he's making the whole situation way more complicated than it needs to be because he frankly doesn't understand what he's doing. But he's a lawyer who is in his 60s. So he's got a lot of experience. I don't mean to say he's old. I mean to say he has a lot of experience. He's practiced in federal court. He seems to be very good at what he does, but he does not do this. So he's not really helping people.
Mm.
So when you're looking for a lawyer, look for a lawyer who regularly helps clients like you, is maybe a good way to say it. Or are you their only type of client, or do they do that? And ask them that. Hey, how much of your career, how much of your practice do you dedicate to clients like me? Is it all of it? Great. Is it, I can handle business, but I usually do personal injury? Well, that's a red flag. Um, right? I think the other thing with lawyer is look at their website, look at their Google reviews, right? I mean, I'm a firm believer in 2026. If you're a lawyer who doesn't have a website, if you don't have Google reviews, if you don't have content out there proving who you are, I'm going to be a little suspicious of you personally. It's not. I'm preaching to the choir, but it's not very hard to do those things. It's hard to do them well, but it's not hard to do the bare minimum of having a site that explains who you are. Um, and I'm a big proponent of non-hourly billing, right? So we've been not billing by the hour. We've been offering mm, we've been offering non-hourly rates for almost 15 years now. We have not charged anyone by the hour since the start of COVID, so since 2020. I am now a big fan of trying to work with lawyers who are willing to enter into proactive pricing arrangements with people, right? So the lawyer just says, "Hey, it's going to be this much per hour. Here's my retainer." I think there's lawyers who are out there who are going to be a bit more proactive. The idea, how that protects a business owner, is that a lawyer who's willing to give a price is a lawyer who's confident that they can do the work and knows what goes into the work. So it's kind of self-selective. Whereas a lawyer says, "I don't care. You pay me $350 an hour. I can do whatever the hell you want." They might not know what they're doing.
Very well said. Now, when it comes to the future, Andrew, where do you think the future of business law is going? Like, are there really any big changes people need to pay attention to?
Um, I mean, in my profession, I like to say I think lawyers who use AI are going to replace lawyers who don't.
Mm.
Um, I think that's inevitable. Um, I think, a lot of people are going to be figuring out how they deal with AI in different ways. Um, that might be they have to figure out a new value proposition. So, for right now, I definitely think it's business has always been evolving, so to speak, right? There's no longer milkmen. There's no longer, a lot of businesses that existed 30, 40, 50 years ago just don't exist anymore, but there are new opportunities. So I think the world of business, the one thing that doesn't change is business is always the world of figuring out what people are willing to pay for and how you can offer that for a fair price, and still make a profit. So that little element there is always going to exist. And a lot of things, as much as things change, they don't. Insurance is still kind of the same, trademarks is still the same. So a lot of on that front, I think it's easy to see business as the world changing quickly. On the same time, it doesn't in a way, right? All these AI firms, they're all new, but we've seen tech startups for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Andrew, I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I do want to point people to your website at sparalaw.com. Now, last question for you, Andrew. What does peace of mind mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, right now I've got a newborn at home. She's we rescheduled this podcast before. I think I told you, right? So she's about 6 weeks old, and I have a toddler, 2.5 year old. So right now, peace of mind is not hearing somebody screaming, and knowing they're both sleeping. That might change in a few months, but as of right now, peace of mind is the children being either sleeping or entertained, and that's worth a lot to me right now.
Okay, well, there you have it. Andrew sharing his expertise. So, Andrew, where can people contact you and your practice?
Dan, you already mentioned our website, sparrowlaw.com. That's a good place to figure out who we are, what we do, how we do it, learn a little bit more about us. Also, I tend to be on LinkedIn, so jumping over there, seeing what's going on. We're always posting something. I'm interacting there, reaching out, and yeah, it's probably the best place to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, this is great. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your expertise.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Verdict Signal podcast. Any questions? Please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.